the two-state solution a dream? Can we talk about the two-state solution?
I can only say the following. The existential threat to Israel and to the Palestinians is the same threat. It's perpetual occupation. Israel will end occupation, or occupation will be the end of us. Nothing in the horrendous events of the last year and a half has changed that. Occupation ends in one way. It ends in a border. It ends when there will be a viable, contiguous Palestinian state. The decision is not between one state and two states. It's between two states and no solution. The alternative to a two-state solution is perpetual conflict and, in Israel, an apartheid state. It's important to break it down, though. What are the barriers to a two-state solution? The settlements. And we know with a great deal of clarity what is necessary. Today, there are 700,000 settlers living in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. In order to arrive at a mutually acceptable border, 500,000 of them stay in place and will become part of Israel in the framework of a land swap. 200,000 will have to be relocated. If Israel has the will and the capacity to relocate 200,000 settlers, it's alive. If not, it's dead. We have a government that is doing everything in its power to make that impossible, and they're doing an excellent job of it. The second threat to the two-state solution is the deep trauma that both Israelis and Palestinians have experienced in these past years, and with zero capacity of understanding the trauma of the other side. Palestinians do not understand how mortified Israelis were by the slaughter on October 7th, but we have no idea of the slaughter, and I have no other term, the carnage that we have inflicted gratuitously on Palestinians in ways that I never believed was possible. And neither side is capable of seeing the humanity of the other. And there will be a period of convalescence before it will be possible again to talk about two states. But there's no alternative.
But even before the 7th of October, this horrendous attack, there was no talk about the two states. And for many years now, it seems like no one discusses the problem, not the United States, not the European Union. I mean, it's like a stalemate, and that was even before the 7th of October.
It was lip service. There has been precious little political will in Israel and Palestine to proceed towards an agreement. I have to tell you, as somebody who's been involved in these issues for more than 30 years, the Israeli peace camp evaporated. Israelis were steeped in clinical denial, in what I call occupation denial, and the international community was not willing to impose the actions to elicit from Israel and Palestinians accountability. Israel and Palestinians, especially Israel and the settlements, were undermining European values, European interests, and the possibility of an agreement, and nothing was done about it. People expressed regret, shock, etc. Zero consequences. And the fact that there have been no consequences imposed on either Israelis or Palestinians for such a long time has led to basically a hollow, meaningless political process. There has not been a political process probably since 2014.
Can the Israelis, even with another government, discuss with Hamas? Hamas wants the extinction of Israel. So is it possible to talk with Hamas, to have a political solution with Hamas?
I only deal with easy issues like Jerusalem and not the complicated stuff like Hamas. But having said that, Hamas is...
The easy Jerusalem, yeah.
Hamas is a problem to be solved and not as an interlocutor, at least for now. It is clear that the declared goal of Netanyahu of destroying Hamas is a pretext. There's no way that Hamas will be destroyed because it is a sentiment, and it's sentiment that is rooted in a large sector of Palestinian political culture. What needs to be done is to contain, perhaps neutralize the impact of Hamas, deprive them of governance, deprive them the military capacities. But Israel will need to speak with Palestinians, and I doubt it will be Hamas. It will be perhaps a new version of the Palestinian Authority. Perhaps it will be a unity government in which positive Islamic political elements will be involved. There will need to be a process in which Israelis and Palestinians begin to speak to one another. One of the reasons that Netanyahu has been so supportive of Hamas, allowed so much Qatari money in, he didn't want to address the Palestinians. For him, Hamas was the alternative to a political process, and we see the result. He believed that Hamas could be contained. He was proven wrong on October 7th, and he hasn't learned any lessons since then.
Do you believe that the Israelis want a ceasefire?
100% no. Yes. No, that's not correct. 70% yes. An overwhelming majority of the Israeli public, and all of the polls indicate this, and including the supporters, those who voted for Netanyahu and his coalition, support a ceasefire. We support a ceasefire because we believe that this is being done for ulterior purposes. The only reason that the war is being pursued is not to achieve any military advantage. It is for Netanyahu to stay in power because he knows that the day that there will be a ceasefire, the countdown for his end of power has begun. He will not last very long. Most Israelis understand that there is no release of the hostages except by means of an agreement, and there will be no agreement without a ceasefire. And overwhelmingly, Israelis say, we are who we are because we are devoted and have the solidarity, will release the hostages. We have been told by our military experts, we will be able to handle any military risk if we have a ceasefire. Go for it. So there is a large sense of despair in the country, knowing that we are being run by a cult of people who are self-serving. Today, 1,000 Air Force pilots, 1,000 reserves, sent a letter to the head of the Air Force asking to end the war, that it's useless. These are not the kind of people that usually write letters like this. Yeah. These are not the activists in the peace movement. These are people who are deeply disturbed from what they've seen, and as in the Israeli Air Force, some of them seen some rather shocking things. They are saying the war must end.
And do you think that there is any possibility that the war will end and it will happen in Gaza, what President Trump said, becoming a Riviera? Or because I see also, I will talk again about the Europeans, that it seems that like the world has turned its eye on the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. Like everyone is watching and say, wow, what is happening there? It's terrible, but no one does anything.
Let me respond, at least initially, from a very personal level. I have worked with Palestinians for my adult life. I do not consider myself insensitive to the concerns of Palestinians. I did not believe, for a period of weeks and months into this war, I did not believe what we were doing. Part of it was because news is filtered and Israel controlled the press in all sorts of ways. But I think the psychological barrier was most important, and that was I couldn't bring myself to believe that this is what has become of us, that we were doing this. And it is coming as a shock to increasing numbers of Israelis. I know that we have committed war crimes. War crimes mean we have gone well and beyond any sense of proportional response. And the needle has moved in all sorts of humanitarian concerns. We have morphed into the kind of society that many of us can no longer be proud of. And that is something that much of Israel is only now coming to terms with, and it's a very difficult process. In the years that I have worked on these issues, if I had to sum up what is the core of Israeli occupation, it is the diminished humanity of Palestinians. Israeli lives matter, Palestinian lives matter less. And I think that is a deep, until we overcome that and meet Palestinian eye level, it's going to be extremely difficult to arrive at agreement. I'm an Israeli by choice. I am still, as a patriarch, I believe in the right of self-determination of the Jewish people. I do believe in a deep attachment of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. What I have, Palestinians have, the same right of self-determination, the same right to dignity, the same deep attachment to the land in different ways than my own. Regrettably, I think that much of the Western world has been infected by this diminished humanity of the Palestinians. I met with somebody in the previous Biden administration, senior, early in the war. And I said, look, I like you guys. I want you to succeed, but I get the impression that you really are treating Israeli lives differently than you are Palestinian lives. And his response was, it's not an impression. I have spent hours with the president directly speaking on these issues. And when he spoke about the hostages, he choked up. He was generally moved. And when the subject of civilian casualties among Palestinians came up, his mind began to wander. That is spontaneous. It's bred in the bone. And it is imperative that we be fanatical in guaranteeing the equal humanity of Palestinians and their equities. I'm often asked, what can possibly be done in this desolate landscape where no political process is possible? It is to recognize, elevate, and celebrate the equal humanity of Palestinians. Palestinian lives matter.
Well, you have worked many years in Jerusalem. Talk to us a little bit about the complexity of Jerusalem. Religion there plays a huge role, among other things.
The war in Gaza started in Jerusalem because events in Jerusalem over the last 20 years have been driven not by religion, but by those who weaponize religion, by religious pyromaniacs, by those who claim and who are hostile to political processes. And they've driven events. Al-Aqsa is one of the focal points of civilization. It's also a small atomic device. It has to be treated with a great deal of reverence. It has been treated irresponsibly. And basically, the high ground was ceded to the biblically motivated settlers in the Temple Mount movement, the various iterations of political Islam like Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, and end-of-days evangelicals who make the settlers and the Brotherhood look tame. And for them, Jerusalem is an Armageddon playground. That is not what Jerusalem is. We did a study recently. We have put together a database of all of the sacred and religious sites in and around the old city of Jerusalem. 1.5 square kilometers, 700 sites, hundreds of Muslim sites, hundreds of Jewish sites, hundreds of Christian sites. And we have put it into a model, and the lights go on in the different colors. It's breathtaking. Jerusalem is Jerusalem because it's where the tectonic plates of the West and the Arab world, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam meet up. And as a rule, when Jerusalem is treated responsibly, It is a breathtaking example about how you can have in 1 square kilometer of the old city the powerful symbols of the 3 monotheistic faiths. It's not touchy-feely, it's not fuzzy-warm, it's not kumbaya, but it works. And we have ceded the ground to those who are destroying it. And what started in Jerusalem erupted in Gaza.
But Jerusalem was always, there was always a conflict about Jerusalem. Everyone wanted Jerusalem for themselves. And when there was talk, and in the past with Yitzhak Rabin, Jerusalem was always
You're 100%, you're defining this perfectly. The history of Jerusalem is littered with leaders, tyrants, emperors who have claimed to possess Jerusalem exclusively. None of their stories ended well. Jerusalem is Jerusalem when it is allowed to speak in its own voice. And Jerusalem doesn't have one voice, it has numerous voices, where no community has to struggle to maintain its identity or the integrity of its holy sites. Jerusalem knows how to do that when it is in responsible hands. And as a rule, it's in responsible hands. Regrettably, in recent years, it is the high ground has been turned over to those who are destroying Jerusalem by their exclusionary and incendiary claims, and it's destroying the city. And in order to resume a political process, the forces of moderation, whether they're faith communities like the historic churches, the Greek Orthodox, the Latin churches, and the political communities, we have to recover the high ground and marginalize the religious pyromaniacs.
Are there now in Jerusalem moderate religious leaders?
No.
No.
15 years ago, you could convene the heads of churches, the heads of the Sharia courts in Palestine, and the chief rabbis under one roof. It was not idyllic, it was not a love fest, but it worked, and there was some interesting thing happens. It is not possible to convene the religious leaders of Jerusalem under one roof. I spoke with one of the heads of churches who told me there's one prominent rabbi who is still willing to talk to him under the condition that it's kept secret. We are in the grips of a frenzy of mutual denial in Jerusalem. There are growing hate crimes against Christianity, against Christian property, including Greek Orthodox property, spitting on clerics. That didn't happen before. It was episodic. It is growing. The new normal in Jerusalem is something that is undermining the integrity of the city. Jerusalem is turning into a very unpleasant place, a very dangerous place, and the leadership is not yet there to push back, and we have to push back.
Mr. Seidemann, thank you so much for this discussion. I thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.